I'm glad. Now, land reform is something that isn't just in my cabinet secretary title, but it is something like I suppose everybody in this room is really passionate about and cares deeply about as well. And of course, the symposium couldn't be more timely with, as we've heard, the passage of the Land Reform Bill through the Scottish Parliament just last week. And you may have heard something about that over the course of yesterday and today, but so apologies if I am repeating some things for you. But as I said in that debate last week, the Scotland that we're looking to see and to build is one that's rooted in the values of fairness, of dignity and of hope. One where the land that we have is an asset that benefits the many and not the few. And these words reflect both mine and the Scottish Government's desire to effect real change and really making sure that we are delivering on the hopes and aspirations of communities right across Scotland. However, as we all know, it's not simply a matter of just legislating and hoping for the best. Parliamentary scrutiny is and should be rigorous. I can assure you with this bill, it certainly was. I think it's probably one of the longest bills I've ever seen pass through Parliament. And it took about 19 months from introduction to reach the stage that we got to last month. Now, since the Scottish Parliament reconvened in 1999, we have had a number of land reform bills, and I'm sure what the Scottish Parliament passed last week will not be the last. The provisions in all of these pieces of legislation have required really careful preparation, and key amongst these is the robust and impartial evidence that I know many of you here have been involved in supporting. Government, Parliament and those we engage with all demand, and quite rightly, to know what the impacts of legislation will be. So that's why we need to have that good, solid evidence of the problems that we're seeking to fix. But equally importantly, we need good evidence that our proposed solutions will also do what we want them to. Indeed, I really want to thank JHI and others who were on hand to deliver sometimes very rapid research we needed to be able to inform responses to some of the issues that were raised during the passage of the bill. Only with this basis and evidence, in fact, can we then begin to consider what policies are required to take us on the next steps of our ongoing land reform journey. Now, the need for cutting-edge research and evidence is why I'm really proud to support Scotland's academic community and why the Scottish Government continues to fund and support the Strategic Research Programme. It provides that long-term interdisciplinary research that informs government decisions, it informs our policy objectives, and really helps us to grapple with those challenges and trade-offs that are inherent in policy development. And since 2022, this part of the Strategic Research Programme, Scotland's Land Reform Futures, has gathered that really crucial insight into how land is owned and managed in Scotland and further afield. And I really just want to thank everyone who's been involved in that work so far. And in particular, I'd really like to thank all of those who've been involved in making this symposium happen. Now, researchers from here at JHI, the SRUC and beyond have collaborated to explore the various ways decisions are made in relation to land, including the role local communities and landowners can play. Now, through analysing land market trends, developing valuable new data sets and consulting the unique and diverse opinions of stakeholders and experts, you have drawn some really important conclusions from that. And especially the work on land data transparency, that is incredibly important. Scotland's people have a right to know who owns this country's land, who makes the decisions on how it's managed, and who holds sway with local communities. The Scottish Government is committed to improving transparency of those who own and control land in Scotland. This is ultimately at the heart of our land reform objectives. And similarly, your research on the theory and practice of land tenures is really important, as is the consideration of alternative models of land tenure. Now, all of this work has built upon Scotland's international reputation for research and land reform, but that reputation is by no means accidental. It's been really hard earned by the work and collaboration of our country's excellent academic institutions, and it's been really great to see this reputation just continue to grow in recent years and to see what a thriving research community that we're really fortunate to have here in Scotland. But of course, I don't want to be too parochial. I know that a key part of this event is about learning from international researchers as well. Scotland's land use and ownership patterns are, of course, a result of our own history and particular Scottish context. But we would be wrong not to look overseas for inspiration when we're considering land reform. And that's where I am really grateful to those of you who've been sharing your expertise and experience from other countries so that we can learn from what's been done before and in return share what we've learned ourselves. I know that there have been a number of presentations, which unfortunately I wasn't able to attend, on the different land governance models in Netherlands, Flanders and France, but particularly on France and the SAFER system. I am so sorry I couldn't get here on time for the presentation on that this morning, because it's one system that has stayed in my mind. Firstly, having read the research that had been done on that by the Scottish Land Commission, I then visited them in France to learn more about it. And it's just been really fascinating to learn about its history and how it operates today. Now, of course, there's a very big difference between where SAFER is and the very tentative first steps that we've taken in Scotland recently in relation to involvement in the land market. Again, we are working from a different base and a different historical context. But despite our systems often being different, I think SAFER demonstrates, as the Scottish Land Commission noted, that rural economic development can be supported by powers to regulate and intervene in land transfers. But it's also been really fascinating to hear from those from further afield this morning. I caught Jamie's presentation on the alternative agricultural land tenure systems in Canada and the food systems transformation aspirations which are driving that. Hopefully I'm right in saying that, Jamie, or you'll correct me if I'm wrong, because it's funny how a lot of the threads of different conversations seem to all coalesce around discussions that I've been having over the course of this past couple of weeks. I was just at an event last night hearing from Corinna Hawkes, who's the Director of Food Systems and Food Safety at the UN FAO last night. That was on the back of a food security conference that we'd hosted in Edinburgh just last week, where our research institutes were, of course, well represented. So these issues around food systems transformation, our land, how we use that, are all very much at the forefront of our minds right now. And of course, they are all interconnected. When we consider access to land, food policy, agricultural policy, our natural environment, all of these we have been in the process of transforming in Scotland over the course of the past few years. An example of that is the Good Food Nation Act in 2022. The Scottish Government has to now develop a plan and publish that, which we're aiming to do by the end of this year, setting out how we intend to tackle some of the interrelated issues that food policy touches, such as health, social justice, agriculture, climate change. We had the Agriculture and Rural Communities Scotland Act, which was passed by the Scottish Parliament last year, establishing the framework for our support for agriculture and rural communities, where we are still mid-transformation. We also have a Natural Environment Bill, which is about how we protect and manage our biodiversity in Scotland, working its way through Parliament just now. And my colleague, the Minister for Agriculture, Jim Fairley, was just at committee this morning for the first stage of the Crofting Bill. And of course, as we've mentioned already today, the Land Reform Bill. And I do just want to take this opportunity, first of all, to thank everyone here whose hard work contributed to that bill. It wouldn't have been as smooth or perhaps even possible without that expertise. And I just want to set out a few key pieces. Again, apologies if this has been covered already in some of the presentations that you've heard. But the bill will ensure, for the first time in Scotland, it will give Scottish ministers powers to ensure that the public interest is considered when more than 1,000 hectares of land is being sold. Ministers can require that land should be sold in lots, and that those lots are offered to different buyers where they determine that this could make local communities more sustainable. The bill also looks to give communities more opportunities to own land through introducing advance notice of certain sales from large landholdings over 1,000 hectares. And just to give you an idea of the scale of that, that makes up more than 50% of Scotland's land. It will also place legal responsibilities on the owners of the very largest landholdings to set out how they use their land through land management plans, and they will have to consult and engage with communities on those. Also, importantly, in part 2 of the bill, we've looked to provide fairness for our tenant farmers and also modernise the law that governs small landholdings in Scotland. And we also now have the power to create new small landholdings in Scotland for the first time in over a century. Now, this is really significant. Small landholdings would be about 20 hectares in size. And given that the Scottish Government is one of the biggest landholders and landowners in Scotland, we need to be, and I would very much expecting us to be, leading by example when it comes to the creation of those. Now, I know that views overall on the bill are divided. Some feel the bill went too far, others felt it didn't go far enough. But as I've said repeatedly in Parliament, as well as to fellow MSPs, We can only intervene where we have that good, solid evidence base to do that. Good evidence on the problem, the proposed solutions, and on the impacts that they might have. And in some cases, that evidence wasn't available. But what I do hope that the bill can establish from here is a solid foundation from which we can only look to build on in the future. And again, I am really grateful to the work of JHI to support some early analysis of just some of the issues that we've had to grapple with. We know that there will be more work to do. There is also a requirement for the bill to be reviewed by the Land Commissioners at the Scottish Land Commission. This review will include the impact and effect of the land reform measures on islands and island communities, and it's also going to consider other matters that were related to the scope of the bill. Scottish ministers are also going to be required to respond to that review, outlining what actions we would have to take as a result of any findings. Again, these are examples of where a continued focus on gathering land reform research and evidence is going to help influence policy into the future. So the Scottish Government is now looking towards implementing the land reform bill. We will again be working closely with colleagues in academia as well as those at the Scottish Land Commission and beyond. Together, we will make the bill measures a reality, bring about those practical and positive changes to rural communities right across the country. Other work is also ongoing that might be of interest to many of you here. So I just want to briefly touch on some of those other elements of work that we've been conducting a review on all of the community rights to buy. This began in the summer of 2024, and we are expecting that to report soon. There have also been another set of consultations on other policy areas such as compulsory purchase orders and compulsory sales orders. So well into the next session of Parliament, there will still be a lot of work to do and a lot of work to take forward. But in all of that, and in any of the work that we do, it's collaboration that is really at the heart of that approach that we take forward. Land reform isn't an area that we as a government can do in isolation or do alone. It is very much a collective effort. It requires that input of researchers, policymakers, communities, and indeed any of those interested parties. It requires that open dialogue, mutual respect, and a real willingness to challenge some of the assumptions. And I really, again, just want to thank all of you who've contributed to where we are today. Your work matters because it is actively shaping the future direction that we take. And looking ahead, I am actually really quite excited about where we go from here and optimistic for the future. As I've already said, there is an awful lot of work to do. We know that land reform is complex. It's intertwined with Scotland's rural economy, our natural environment, our country's culture and our history. But it is also necessary, being that tool for justice, sustainability and resilience, importantly. So in the time that I have left in this role, I feel like that sounds a bit like I'm dying. I'm not, I'm just stepping down to the next elections. I really am just looking forward to continue to work with you, with our academic institutions, and really just for that collaboration to strengthen as we move forward from here. And we look ahead to the implementation of the new legislation and of course, where we then look to go from there. So again, thank you so much for having me to address you today. And I really appreciate the chance to have so many interesting conversations with all of you and to have heard some of those other discussions today too. Thank you.